Picture this. A man sits alone on a frozen train platform in the dead of winter, his last $3 clutched in trembling hands, watching his breath turn to frost in the bitter air. He's a trained doctor, skilled, educated, desperate. Behind him lies scandal and ruin. Ahead, only the uncertain promise of the wild frontier. He's about to freeze to death. But then, through the blinding snow, a figure appears on horseback. A woman. Wealthy, powerful, utterly unexpected. What happens next will become the most whispered about love story from the Rio Grande to the Canadian border. A tale of passion, danger, and two hearts that defied every rule the West had written. The winter of 1889 hit Montana territory like God's own hammer. The blizzard that swept through Helena that January night was the kind that made old-timers shake their heads and mutter prayers. At the deserted railway station, Dr. Michael Mick Sullivan sat hunched on a wooden bench, his medical bag clutched against his chest like a shield against the cold that was slowly, methodically killing him. 29 years old. Harvard Medical School graduate. Former surgeon at Boston General Hospital. And now, quite possibly, about to become another frozen corpse in the Montana wilderness. His fingers had gone numb an hour ago. His lips were blue, and every breath felt like swallowing knives. The last train east had departed 3 hours past, and the westbound wouldn't arrive until morning, if the storm didn't bury the tracks first. The boarding house had turned him away when his money ran out. $3.17. That's what remained of his former life. Mick thought about the scandal that had destroyed him. Dr. Catherine Blackwell, the hospital administrator's daughter, had made it clear she wanted him, had cornered him in the surgical supply room, her hands possessive, her intentions unmistakable. When he'd refused her advances, explaining he couldn't betray his professional ethics or her father's trust, she'd screamed. She'd torn her own dress, scratched her own face, and run into the hallway claiming he'd assaulted her. Her word against his. The daughter of wealth and privilege against an Irish immigrant's son who'd clawed his way through medical school on scholarships and sheer determination. They'd stripped his medical license. Blacklisted him from every hospital in Boston. His reputation, built on years of grueling study and dedication, demolished in a single afternoon by lies and wounded pride. So he'd taken what little money he had and bought a ticket west, to the mining camps and frontier towns where doctors were scarce and questions fewer. But his funds had run dry in Helena, and now he sat in this frozen hellhole, wondering if pride had finally killed him. The sound of hoofbeats on frozen ground pulled him from his dark thoughts. Through the swirling snow, a figure emerged, someone on horseback, leading a second mount behind them. As they drew closer, Mick's feverish mind struggled to process what he was seeing. The rider wasn't a man. She sat astride a magnificent bay mare with the easy confidence of someone born to the saddle. Despite the storm, her posture was straight, her movements controlled. She wore a heavy wool coat of obvious quality, fur-lined leather gloves, and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed her face. Even through his fading consciousness, Mick could see this was no ordinary ranch wife or traveling schoolmarm. This was a woman who commanded respect. She dismounted with fluid grace and tied both horses to the hitching post before approaching the station. Her boots, custom leather, Mick's doctor's eye noticed, crunched through the snow with purposeful strides. When she pushed through the station door, a gust of wind and snow followed her inside. She shook it off like a dog shaking water, then turned her attention to Mick. "Sweet Jesus," she breathed, her voice low and smoky, tinged with the hint of a Texas drawl. "How long have you been sitting here?" Mick tried to answer, but his teeth were chattering too violently. He managed a small shrug. The woman moved closer, and he got his first clear look at her face. She was perhaps 30 years old, with strong features that spoke of character rather than delicate beauty. Her skin was tanned from years under the western sun, and her dark eyes assessed him with sharp intelligence. A few strands of black hair had escaped from under her hat, framing a face that was both fierce and feminine. "Let me see your hands," she commanded. It wasn't a request. Mick found himself obeying, holding out his trembling hands. She pulled off her gloves and took his fingers in hers, her own hands surprisingly warm and strong. She examined them with the practiced eye of someone who'd dealt with frostbite before. "Not too far gone yet, but close," she muttered. Then she noticed his medical bag, the way he was dressed, quality clothes now wrinkled and travel-stained. "You a doctor?" Mick managed through chattering teeth. "Michael Sullivan. Boston." Her eyebrows rose slightly. "Long way from Boston, Dr. Sullivan. What brings a trained physician to Montana in the dead of winter?" "Trouble," Mick said simply. There was no point in lying. He was too cold, too exhausted, too close to death. The woman studied him for a long moment, and Mick had the unsettling feeling she was seeing straight through to his soul. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her, because she made a decision. "You're going to freeze to death if you stay here," she stated matter-of-factly. "The next train won't come until noon tomorrow, assuming the tracks are clear. Can you stand?" Mick tried. His legs betrayed him, buckling before he'd made it halfway up. Without hesitation, the woman caught him. Despite her smaller frame, she was strong, ranch strong, the kind of strength that came from years of hard work. She pulled his arm over her shoulders and hauled him upright. "Come on, Dr. Sullivan. Let's get you somewhere warm before I have to explain to the sheriff why there's a frozen Harvard man on my train platform." "Your platform?" Mick mumbled, confused. "Long story," she said, half carrying him toward the door. "I'll tell you after you've thought out, and I'm sure you'll live to hear it." The cold outside hit Mick like a physical blow, but the woman's grip on him never faltered. She got him to the second horse, a sturdy gelding, and with surprising efficiency managed to get him into the saddle. "Hold on to the horn," she ordered, swinging up onto her own mount. "We've got 3 miles to ride, and I need you conscious for all of them. Talk to me. Tell me about Boston." Mick's fevered brain latched onto the command. As they rode through the blinding storm, he found himself talking, rambling, really, about Boston winters, about Harvard, about anything his frozen mind could grasp. The woman rode close beside him, her voice cutting through the wind whenever his speech faltered, pulling him back from the edge of unconsciousness. "Stay with me, Dr. Sullivan. What made you become a doctor? Tell me that story." "My mother," Mick heard himself say, "died of childbed fever. I was 12. The doctor came too late, too drunk. Watched her die. Couldn't do anything. Promised myself, learn to save people. Learn to do it right." "Good reason," the woman said. "Best reason I've heard. Keep talking. What kind of doctor did you become?" "Surgeon. Trauma. Specialized in emergency procedures. Battlefield medicine. Studied the new techniques from the European war hospitals." He was losing the thread, his words slurring together. The woman's voice became sharper, more commanding. "Don't you dare pass out on me, Sullivan. We're almost there. Look up, see those lights?" Through the snow, Mick could make out the warm glow of windows. Buildings. Civilization. "That's the Silver Creek Ranch," the woman continued. "My ranch. And you're going to make it there, doctor? Because I didn't ride 3 miles in a blizzard to fish your corpse out of a snowbank. Now stay awake." The last thing Mick remembered before darkness finally claimed him was the sound of the woman shouting orders, strong arms catching him as he fell, and the blessed, overwhelming warmth of being carried indoors. Mick woke to warmth, softness, and the smell of wood smoke and coffee. For a long, disoriented moment, he had no idea where he was. The bed beneath him was the most comfortable thing he'd felt in months, a real feather mattress with clean sheets and heavy quilts piled high. Sunlight streamed through a window, and he could hear voices from somewhere else in the building. His body ached, his head throbbed, and his fingers and toes burned with the pins and needles sensation of returning circulation. But he was alive. The door opened, and the woman from last night entered carrying a tray. In the daylight, Mick could see her more clearly. She was tall for a woman, perhaps 5 feet 8 inches, with the lean, muscular build of someone who worked hard every day. Her hair was pulled back in a practical braid, and she wore men's trousers, riding boots, and a simple cotton shirt, utterly scandalous attire by Boston standards, completely practical by frontier standards. "You're awake," she said, setting the tray on the bedside table. "Good. I was beginning to wonder if you'd sleep through to spring." "How long?" Mick's voice came out as a croak. 18 hours. It's nearly noon on Thursday." She poured coffee from a pot and handed him the cup. "Drink this. Slowly. Your body's been through hell." Mick obeyed, savoring the warmth spreading through his chest. The coffee was strong, slightly bitter, exactly what he needed. "Where am I?" he asked. "The main house of the Silver Creek Ranch, about 3 miles north of Helena. My bedroom, specifically, since it's the warmest room in the house and you needed heat more than privacy." Mick looked around, realizing this was indeed a woman's private chamber. Simple but comfortable, with touches of personality, books on a shelf, a writing desk, quality furniture that spoke of wealth without ostentation. "I apologize for the intrusion." "Don't," she cut him off. "I offered. You would have died otherwise." She pulled up a chair and sat, studying him with those sharp dark eyes. "I'm Caroline Reed. I own the Silver Creek Ranch, 10,000 acres, 200 head of cattle, 30 horses, and about 40 employees depending on the season." Mick blinked. He'd heard of women inheriting ranches out west, but actually owning and running one? Caroline seemed to read his thoughts and smiled grimly. "Yes, I actually run it. Inherited it from my father 5 years ago. He taught me everything he knew, and I've built it into one of the most profitable operations in Montana territory." "I apologize," Mick said quickly. "I meant no disrespect. I'm simply not accustomed to women in such positions. You're in Montana now, Dr. Sullivan, not Boston. Things are different here. We care more about what a person can do than what they wear under their trousers." She poured herself a cup of coffee. "Now, why don't you tell me what really brought you west?" Mick studied her face, trying to decide how much to reveal. But something about Caroline Reed inspired honesty, perhaps the directness of her gaze, or the fact that she'd saved his life. "There was a woman," he began, "Dr. Catherine Blackwell, hospital administrator's daughter. She wanted more from me than professional courtesy. When I refused her advances, she accused me of forcing myself on her." Caroline's expression didn't change, but he saw her grip tighten on her coffee cup. "Her word against yours?" she asked quietly. "Her word against mine," Mick confirmed. "She was wealthy, well-connected, the beloved daughter of a respected man. I was the son of Irish immigrants, working class, someone who'd climbed above his station. The hospital board didn't even pretend to investigate fairly. They stripped my medical license, spread word throughout Boston that I was dangerous. I left before they could press criminal charges. So you ran west, hoping to start over in the mining camps where nobody knows your name and doctors are scarce enough that nobody asks too many questions." "Yes." Mick met her eyes directly. "I'm a good doctor, Miss Reed. I'm skilled, thorough, ethical. I didn't do what she accused me of. But I understand if you want me gone. I won't blame you for not wanting that kind of trouble around your ranch." Caroline was quiet for a long moment, her dark eyes never leaving his face. Mick had the unsettling feeling she was weighing his soul. Finally, she spoke. "I believe you." Mick's breath caught. "What?" "I believe you," she repeated. "I've known too many men who force themselves on women. They have a look about them. Entitlement, arrogance, a particular kind of cruelty. You don't have that look. You have the look of a man who's been wronged and doesn't know how to make it right." Relief flooded through Mick so intensely it was almost painful. "Furthermore," Caroline continued, "I need a doctor. I don't have a license anymore." "I don't give a damn about a piece of paper from Boston," Caroline said bluntly. "Can you set bones? Treat infections? Deliver calves when they're breech?" "Calves?" Mick repeated, startled. "You're a surgeon. Trauma specialist. Mammals are mammals, Dr. Sullivan. If you can operate on people, you can handle livestock." She leaned forward. "I lose good men every year because there's no medical care within 50 miles. Last year, one of my best hands died from an infected leg wound that any halfway decent doctor could have treated. 2 years before that, A cowboy got thrown from his horse and died slowly from internal bleeding while I sat helpless, watching. Her voice had gone hard, pain evident beneath the practical words. I've been trying to hire a doctor for 3 years, she continued. Posted advertisements from San Francisco to St. Louis. Nobody wants to work on an isolated ranch owned by a woman. They want established practices in real towns, where they can charge wealthy patients and build respectable reputations. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the snow-covered landscape. I'm offering you a job, Dr. Sullivan. Good pay, comfortable quarters, all the medical supplies you need. You'd have your own cabin near the main house, meals provided by our cook, and full access to my library. In exchange, you'd tend my ranch hands when they're injured, help with difficult animal births when needed, and maybe teach some basic first aid to the men. Mick's mind raced. It was more than he'd dared hope for. But there was something he needed to know. What would people say, he asked quietly, about you hiring a single man to live on your property? About our arrangement? Caroline turned from the window, and her smile was sharp enough to cut. Dr. Sullivan, I'm 32 years old, unmarried, and running a successful ranch in Montana Territory. People already say plenty about me. The difference is, I don't give a damn what they think. She walked back to him, extending her hand. Do we have an agreement? Mick looked at that strong, calloused hand. A working hand, a hand that had pulled him from certain death. He thought about his other options. Freezing train stations, suspicious mining camps, a life spent running from his past. He took her hand and shook it firmly. We have an agreement. Caroline's smile transformed her face, and for the first time, Mick saw not just the tough ranch owner but the woman beneath, intelligent, passionate, and surprisingly beautiful when she let her guard down. Welcome to the Silver Creek Ranch, Dr. Sullivan. Try not to freeze to death again. I'd hate to waste the effort I put into saving you. Before we continue this epic tale, tell us where you're listening from and hit subscribe for more frontier love stories that'll capture your heart. My father believed in education, she explained one evening as they sat by the fire in his cabin, drinking coffee. Even for daughters. Especially for daughters, he'd say. Caroline, he'd tell me, the world's changing. Women won't always be content to sit in parlors and embroider pillowcases. You need to be ready. He sounds like a remarkable man, Mick said. He was. Caroline's voice softened with memory. He came west with nothing but determination and a good horse. Built this ranch from raw land and sheer stubbornness. When my mother died in childbirth, I was 10. He could have sent me east to be raised by relatives. Instead, he taught me everything he knew about running a ranch. How to read land, judge horses and cattle, manage accounts, lead men. And when he died? Heart gave out 5 years ago. I was 27, unmarried, and suddenly in charge of a major operation. His former business partners tried to buy me out, practically demanded it, said it wasn't proper for a woman to run a ranch. The cowboys weren't sure they could take orders from the boss's daughter. She smiled grimly. I proved them all wrong. Turned the ranch profitable, expanded our holdings, earned respect from every rancher in Montana Territory. And marriage? Mick asked, then immediately wanted to take it back. It was too personal, too forward. But Caroline didn't seem offended. I was engaged once, back when I was 22. To Richard Halverson, son of a neighboring rancher. He seemed perfect, handsome, charming, from a good family. Then one night, I overheard him talking to his father about our upcoming marriage. About how once we were wed he'd tame me, sell off half my land to pay his gambling debts, and turn the Silver Creek into a subsidiary of their operation. Her voice had gone cold, hard. I broke the engagement the next day. He threatened to ruin my reputation, spread lies about my character. I told him if he tried, I'd make sure every rancher in Montana knew about his debts and his plans. He left me alone after that. But you never tried again? Mick asked gently. Caroline looked at him, and in her dark eyes he saw years of loneliness masked by fierce independence. Who would I marry, Dr. Sullivan? The men in Helena who want a wealthy wife they can control? The cowboys who work for me and can barely meet my eyes? The business associates who see me as a curiosity, a novelty, a woman playing at a man's job. She stood and walked to the window, her back straight, shoulders tense. I'm 32 years old, Michael. Too old to be a blushing bride, too young to resign myself to spinsterhood. Too independent to accept a marriage that would steal my ranch, too lonely to pretend I don't sometimes ache for. She trailed off, then laughed bitterly. Listen to me. Pouring my heart out like some schoolgirl. Mick stood and moved beside her, careful not to touch but close enough that she'd know he was there. For what it's worth, he said quietly, any man who sees you as anything less than extraordinary is a fool. Caroline turned to face him, and the vulnerability in her expression took his breath away. For a moment, they stood frozen, the air between them charged with possibility. Then Caroline stepped back, her walls slamming back into place. It's late. I should let you rest. We've got a long day tomorrow. Sam wants you to look at one of the horses that's been limping. Caroline. Good night, Dr. Sullivan. She was gone before he could finish the thought, leaving Mick alone with the sudden, undeniable knowledge that he was developing feelings for his employer, feelings that could complicate everything. Spring came to Montana with explosive force, transforming the frozen landscape into a riot of wildflowers and green grass. The ranch work intensified, and Mick found himself busier than he'd ever been in Boston. He treated broken bones, snake bites, infections, burns from branding irons, and countless other injuries that came with working a massive cattle operation. The cowboys had fully accepted him now, bringing their ailments to him without hesitation. They appreciated that he didn't judge them, didn't lecture, just patched them up and sent them back to work with clear instructions for care. But it was his growing relationship with Caroline that occupied most of his thoughts. They'd fallen into an unspoken routine, morning consultations about ranch business, shared meals when schedules permitted, evening conversations that stretched long into the night. Mick was falling in love with her. He tried to fight it, tried to remind himself that she was his employer, that he was damaged goods with a ruined reputation, that she deserved better than a disgraced doctor living on her charity. But the heart doesn't listen to logic. He loved her strength, her intelligence, the way she commanded respect without diminishing anyone. He loved how she looked at sunrise, checking the fence lines with an expert eye. He loved her laugh, rare but genuine, and the way she'd absently tuck a strand of hair behind her ear when she was deep in thought. He loved how she could deliver a breech calf with the same steady hands she used to keep the ranch accounts, then turn around and discuss literature or current events with the insight of an Eastern intellectual. Most of all, he loved that she saw him, not as a title or a scandal, not as a hired hand or a charity case, but as Michael Sullivan, complete and imperfect and worthy of respect. The trouble was, he had no idea how she felt about him. The crisis came in early May. One of the ranch hands, a young cowboy named Tommy, was thrown from his horse during a roundup. The horse had spooked at a rattlesnake, and Tommy landed badly, his chest taking the full impact. They brought him to Mick's cabin unconscious, barely breathing, his ribs crushed. How bad? Caroline demanded, appearing moments after they'd laid Tommy on the examination table. Mick's hands moved quickly, assessing the damage. Bad. Internal bleeding, possible punctured lung. He needs surgery immediately or he'll die. Then operate, Caroline said firmly. Caroline, I haven't done a major surgery since Boston. If something goes wrong. If you don't try, he dies for certain, Caroline interrupted. I trust you, Michael. You can do this. Her faith in him was absolute, unwavering. It gave Mick the courage he needed. Clear the room except for anyone who can follow orders and has a strong stomach, he commanded, his voice shifting into the tone he'd used in Boston operating rooms. I need hot water, clean sheets, and lots of light. Caroline, I need you to assist. For the next 4 hours, Mick operated. His hands were steady despite the years away from surgery, his mind sharp and focused. Caroline assisted with calm efficiency, following his instructions precisely, never flinching at the blood or the reality of what they were doing. When he finally closed the last suture, Tommy's breathing had stabilized. He'd live. Mick stepped back, exhausted but triumphant. Caroline was looking at him with undisguised admiration. "That was incredible," she said softly. "Michael, you're brilliant." The use of his first name, the warmth in her voice, it broke something loose inside him. "I couldn't have done it without you," he replied. "You were perfect." They stood close in the lamplight, both covered in blood, both exhausted, both suddenly aware of how alone they were. Caroline reached up and touched his face, her calloused hand gentle against his cheek. "Michael Sullivan," she whispered, "you are the most remarkable man I've ever known." "Caroline," he began, but she silenced him with a kiss. It was everything a first kiss should be, tentative yet passionate, questioning yet answering, a declaration and a promise all at once. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "This is complicated," Caroline said, but she didn't pull away. "I know. You work for me. People will talk. I know. I'm your employer. You might feel obligated." "Caroline," Mick interrupted gently, "I love you. Not because you pay me or saved my life or gave me a home. I love you because you're brilliant and strong and beautiful and you see me as I actually am, not as what I've lost or what I might have been." Caroline's eyes filled with tears, the first time he'd seen her cry. "I love you too," she whispered. "God help me, I've been fighting it for months, but I love you." They kissed again, longer this time, with the certainty of mutual feeling behind it. The next few weeks were both wonderful and terrifying. They kept their relationship quiet, not out of shame but out of practicality. Caroline's reputation was already unconventional. Adding a romantic relationship with her employee would give her enemies ammunition. But the ranch hands weren't fools. They saw the way Caroline and Mick looked at each other, the way their hands would brush during conversations, the fact that Mick's evening visits to the main house were lasting later and later. Sam Jensen pulled Mick aside one morning while they were checking fence lines. "Doc, I'm gonna speak plain," the old foreman said. "The men and I, we see what's happening between you and Miss Caroline. And we want you to know, we're behind you both." Mick was speechless. Sam continued, "Miss Caroline's been alone too long. She's a good woman, the best boss any of us has ever worked for. If she's found happiness with you, then that's all that matters. Any man who has a problem with it will answer to me." "Thank you, Sam. That means more than you know. Just one thing, document don't hurt her. She may be strong as iron on the outside, but she's got a heart same as anyone. You hurt her, and there won't be enough of you left for a proper burial." "I'd never." "I know. Just wanted to make sure we understood each other." But their happiness was about to be tested in ways neither of them expected. In June, a stranger arrived at the Silver Creek Ranch. He was a thin, pale man with calculating eyes and expensive Eastern clothes, Dr. Harrison Blackwell, Catherine's brother and a physician from Boston. He'd come to destroy Mick. "Dr. Sullivan," Blackwell said smoothly when Caroline showed him into her office. "Or should I say, the man masquerading as a doctor? I'm here on behalf of the Massachusetts Medical Board to investigate reports of illegal practice." "This is Montana territory," Caroline said coldly. "Massachusetts has no jurisdiction here." "But ethical violations do," Blackwell replied. "Your employee lost his medical license due to criminal behavior. He has no right to practice medicine anywhere." "He saved a man's life last month," Caroline said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Performed surgery no one else in 200 miles could have done." "Without a license, that's illegal," Blackwell smiled. "I'm afraid I'll have to report this to the territorial authorities." The hearing was held in Helena 3 days later. It seemed like half the territory showed up, not to condemn Mick, but to support him. Patient after patient testified about his skill and compassion. Tommy, still recovering, told the story of how Mick had saved his life. Sam and the other ranch hands spoke about his dedication. Even the territorial doctor from Helena testified that Mick's work was as fine as any surgeon in San Francisco. But it was Caroline's testimony that sealed the verdict. She stood before the judge, dressed in her finest clothes but still unmistakably herself, strong, confident, unafraid. "Your Honor," Dr. Sullivan came to Montana Territory not as a criminal fleeing justice, but as a skilled physician seeking a place where his abilities mattered more than false accusations. My ranch hands trust him with their lives. I trust him with my life. And more than that. She paused, then looked directly at Mick. I love him. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. I'm asking this court to grant Dr. Sullivan a territorial medical license, Caroline continued. And I'm asking it knowing that if you refuse, I'll continue to employ him anyway. Because out here, we judge people by what they do, not by lies told about them back east. The judge was silent for a long moment, then smiled. Mrs. Reed, excuse me, Miss Reed, that's quite a statement. It's the truth, Your Honor. The judge turned to Blackwell. Do you have any actual evidence of wrongdoing by Dr. Sullivan? Anything beyond accusations from a woman who isn't even present to testify? Blackwell sputtered. My sister wouldn't lie. Your sister, the judge interrupted, whose character has been called into question by several witnesses here today. I've heard testimony about a pattern of inappropriate behavior toward male hospital staff. It was Blackwell's turn to go pale. Dr. Sullivan, the judge said, your work in this territory has been exemplary. Your skills have saved lives. And you have the support of some of the most respected people in Montana. I'm granting you a full territorial medical license, effective immediately. The courtroom erupted in cheers. As for you, Mr. Blackwell, the judge continued coldly, I suggest you return to Boston and tell your sister that her lies don't work out here. We're a bit more interested in the truth than in social standing. That night, after the celebration had died down and they'd returned to the ranch, Caroline and Mick sat on the porch of the main house, watching the stars. You told the whole territory you love me, Mick said, still somewhat dazed. I did, Caroline confirmed. You know what people will say. I know what I feel. She took his hand. Michael Sullivan, I've spent my whole life worrying about what people think, what people say, what's proper and appropriate. I'm done with that. I love you, and I don't care who knows it. Mick pulled her close, kissing her under the vast Montana sky. Marry me, he said when they broke apart. What? Marry me, Caroline. I know I'm not wealthy, I know I'm still rebuilding my reputation, but I love you more than I thought possible to love anyone. Marry me. Caroline laughed, a sound of pure joy. You're asking me? Most men would expect me to ask them, given that I'm the wealthy one. I'm not most men. No, Caroline agreed, cupping his face in her hands. You're not. You're the man who's brave enough to let me be strong, smart enough to see me as an equal, and foolish enough to fall in love with the most stubborn woman in Montana Territory. Is that a yes? That's a yes. They married a month later, in July of 1889, in a ceremony that became legendary throughout Montana Territory. Cowboys from every ranch in the region attended. Business associates from Helena and even Denver came to witness the union of the wealthy Cattle Baroness and her physician. Caroline wore a dress of deep blue silk that she'd ordered from San Francisco, but she kept her hair in its practical braid and wore her comfortable boots under the skirts. She looked magnificent. Mick wore a new suit but couldn't help fidgeting with the collar. Sam had to remind him twice to stop. The ceremony was performed by the circuit preacher, and his words seemed especially meaningful given how they'd found each other. Do you, Caroline Elizabeth Reed, take Michael James Sullivan to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, as long as you both shall live? I do, Caroline said, her voice clear and strong. And do you, Michael James Sullivan, take Caroline Elizabeth Reed to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, as long as you both shall live? I do, Mick replied, his own voice steady despite his racing heart. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Mick's kiss drew cheers and whistles from the assembled cowboys. Caroline blushed but kissed him back with enthusiasm. The celebration that followed was magnificent. Tables groaned under the weight of roasted beef, fresh vegetables from the ranch garden, pies and cakes that had been brought from Helena. There was music, dancing, and storytelling that lasted well into the night. But perhaps the most meaningful moment came when Tommy, still recovering from his injuries but determined to attend the wedding, stood to make a toast. "To Mrs. Sullivan," he said, raising his glass. "The woman who built this ranch into something special, who treats her hands fair, and who had the good sense to fall in love with the man who saved my life. And to Dr. Sullivan, may your love story remind us all that sometimes the best things come from the worst circumstances." The crowd erupted in agreement, and Caroline found herself crying happy tears as Mick squeezed her hand. As the evening wore on and guests began to depart, Caroline and Mick found themselves alone on the porch of the main house, their house now, together. "Well, Dr. Sullivan," Caroline said, leaning against him, "how does it feel to be a married man?" "Like the luckiest man in Montana Territory," Mick replied honestly. "Maybe in all of America. Even though you married the most stubborn, independent, unconventional woman you could find? Especially because of that." He turned to face her fully. "Caroline, you saved my life that night at the train station. But you did more than that. You gave me back my purpose, my dignity, my hope. You saw past the scandal to the man I actually am. That's a gift I can never fully repay." "You don't need to repay it," Caroline said softly. "Love isn't a transaction, Michael. It's a choice we make every day. You chose to trust me with your past. I chose to trust you with my ranch, my heart, my future. We chose each other." They kissed under the stars, and Mick thought about how far he'd come, from that frozen train platform to this moment of perfect happiness. "I have something for you," Caroline said, pulling away. She reached into her pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "I know traditionally the groom gives jewelry, but I wanted to give you something too." Inside was a beautiful pocket watch, gold and engraved with intricate designs. "Open it," she urged. Mick pressed the catch, and the watch opened to reveal an inscription, "To my healing heart, forever yours, C." "Caroline," Mick breathed, overcome. "It's beautiful." "It was my father's," she said. "The most precious thing I own. I want you to have it, to carry with you. So you'll always know you're part of this family, this ranch, this life we're building together." Mick pulled her close, the watch clutched in his hand, and felt tears prick his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. "For everything. For believing in me when no one else would." "Always," Caroline promised. "Through whatever comes, we face it together." The first year of their marriage brought challenges neither of them had anticipated. Combining their lives meant navigating not just their personal relationship but also the complex dynamics of Caroline being both wife and boss. Some of the ranch hands struggled with the change at first, unsure whether to take orders from Miss Caroline or Mrs. Sullivan, uncertain about Mick's role in ranch operations. But Caroline and Mick handled it with characteristic directness. "I'm still the boss," Caroline announced at a ranch meeting. "That hasn't changed. Michael is my husband and the ranch physician. If you're hurt or sick, you answer to him. Everything else goes through me or Sam. Clear?" It was clear. And gradually, the ranch settled into a new rhythm. Mick's medical practice expanded beyond the ranch. Word spread about the skilled doctor at Silver Creek, and people began traveling from miles around to seek his care. Caroline converted one of the ranch's outbuildings into a proper clinic, equipped with everything Mick needed. He treated miners with crushed limbs, children with fever, women with difficult pregnancies. His reputation grew, not as a scandal from the East, but as one of the finest physicians in Montana Territory. But it was their partnership that truly made their marriage special. Caroline had a sharp mind for both business and medicine, often asking Mick questions that led him to new insights. He, in turn, brought an outsider's perspective to ranch operations that helped Caroline see opportunities she'd missed. They made decisions together, shared their dreams and fears, and built something stronger than either could have created alone. Their love story became famous throughout the territory. Newspaper writers came from as far as San Francisco to interview the Cattle Baroness and her doctor husband. Poets wrote verses about the wealthy woman who'd rescued a frozen stranger and found love. Artists painted romanticized versions of their first meeting. But the real story was quieter, deeper, In the morning coffee they shared before the ranch woke up, in the way Caroline would rest her head on Mick's shoulder after a long day, in how Mick would braid Caroline's hair when she was too exhausted to do it herself. The test came in the winter of 1890. Caroline had been feeling ill for weeks. Nausea, fatigue, dizziness. She'd insisted it was nothing, just overwork, but Mick's medical training told him otherwise. When he finally convinced her to let him examine her properly, his diagnosis made them both freeze. "You're pregnant," he said softly. Caroline's face went pale. That's not possible. I'm 33. I thought I was too old." "You're not too old," Mick assured her, taking her hands. "But Caroline, this will be dangerous. Your first pregnancy at your age, the physical demands of ranch work, we need to be very careful." For the first time since Mick had known her, Caroline looked genuinely frightened. "My mother died in childbirth," she whispered. "I was 10. I watched my father grieve for years, saw how it broke him. Michael, I can't live." "Hey," Mick said firmly, pulling her into his arms. "Look at me. I'm a doctor, and more than that, I'm your husband. I won't let anything happen to you. We'll do this together, carefully, with every precaution medical science can provide." "Promise me," Caroline said, her voice breaking. "Promise me if something goes wrong, if you have to choose, you'll save the baby. The ranch needs an heir, and you—" "No," Mick interrupted fiercely. "Don't you dare ask me to make that choice. You're not leaving me, Caroline Sullivan. You're the strongest woman I know, and we're going to get through this together. Both of you." Over the next months, Mick was relentless in his care. He monitored Caroline's health obsessively, adjusted her diet, insisted she reduce her physical workload, and consulted with every medical text he could find on childbirth complications. Caroline chafed at the restrictions. She was used to riding fence lines, not sitting in the main house. But Mick was immovable. "You can hate me for being overprotective," he told her. "But I won't risk you. Not for anything." The cowboys, who'd come to love their boss, rallied around. They took on extra duties without complaint, kept the ranch running smoothly, and treated Caroline with a gentleness that would have amused her under other circumstances. Sam took to checking on her daily, bringing reports so she could stay involved in ranch operations without overtaxing herself. Tommy, fully recovered from his injuries, appointed himself Caroline's unofficial guardian, always nearby if she needed anything. As her belly grew and the baby's movements became stronger, some of Caroline's fear transformed into wonder. "Feel this," she said one evening, taking Mick's hand and placing it on her swollen abdomen. "Right there. Do you feel it?" Mick felt the strong kick against his palm and laughed with pure joy. "That's our child," he marveled. "Our son or daughter. Caroline, this is real. We made this." "I'm still terrified," she admitted. "But I'm also excited. I never thought I'd have this. A husband who loves me, a child, a family." "You have it all," Mick assured her. "And you're going to be a magnificent mother." Labor came on a cold February night, fierce and sudden. Mick had prepared as much as humanly possible, sterilized instruments, clean linens, medications ready, even Sam standing by in case complications required extra hands. But nothing truly prepared him for watching the woman he loved in that kind of pain. "I'm here," he said, holding Caroline's hand as another contraction racked her body. "I've got you. You're doing beautifully." "Liar," Caroline gasped, but she gripped his hand like a lifeline. "This is horrible. Why do women do this?" "Because the result is worth it," Mick said, checking her progress. "And Caroline, you're almost there. Just a little longer." The hours blurred together, pain, fear, exhaustion, and finally, gloriously, the sound of a baby crying. "It's a girl," Mick announced, tears streaming down his face as he placed their daughter on Caroline's chest. "Caroline, we have a daughter." Caroline, exhausted but radiant, looked down at the tiny red-faced baby and began to cry. "She's perfect," she whispered. "Michael, she's absolutely perfect. Just like her mother," Mick said, kissing Caroline's sweaty forehead. "You did it, love. You were so brave." They named her Elizabeth, after Caroline's mother. Little Beth Sullivan had her father's dark hair and her mother's fierce determination, She made her wants known loudly and clearly from the very first day. The ranch celebrated for a week when mother and baby were declared healthy. Cowboys who'd never held a baby learned to dandle Beth carefully. Sam whittled her a set of wooden horses. Even the toughest hands turned soft when the tiny ranch princess looked at them with wide, curious eyes. But perhaps the most touching moment came when Caroline, recovered enough to walk outside, found Mick in the clinic, staring at a medical text. "What are you reading?" she asked. "Everything I can find about childhood illnesses," Mick replied. "I want to be prepared, to keep her safe, to—" "Michael," Caroline interrupted gently, taking the book from his hands. "You're already the best father she could ask for. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to love her." "I do," Mick said. "Love her. Love you. So much that sometimes it terrifies me. What if I lose you? What if something happens?" "Then we face it together," Caroline said firmly. "Like we face everything. Michael, you saved my life that night at the train station. I saved yours by believing in you. We've saved each other over and over in countless small ways. That's what marriage is, two people choosing each other, rescuing each other, building a life together despite the odds." She took his hands. "I won't live in fear. I won't let you live in fear. We're going to raise our daughter to be brave, to be kind, to understand that love is worth every risk." Mick pulled her close. "When did you become so wise?" "I married a brilliant man," Caroline said with a smile. "Some of it must have rubbed off." The years flowed forward like the river that ran through Silver Creek Ranch. Beth grew into a spirited child who could ride before she could write, who followed her father on medical calls and her mother on ranch rounds, absorbing knowledge from both. When she was 3, twin boys arrived, James and Thomas, named for both their grandfathers. The ranch house rang with laughter and chaos, with midnight feedings and first steps, with scraped knees and triumphant achievements. Mick's medical practice flourished. He became known as the finest physician in Montana Territory, respected not just for his skill but for his compassion. He never turned away a patient who couldn't pay, often accepting eggs, vegetables, or promises of future payment. Caroline supported this completely, understanding that healing wasn't just about profit. Caroline's ranch expanded to become one of the largest operations in the territory. She hired more hands, improved breeding stock, invested in new technologies. But she never lost her connection to the land or her commitment to treating her employees fairly. Their partnership became legendary. Other ranchers and businesspeople sought their advice, amazed at how seamlessly they worked together. "You can't tell where one ends and the other begins," people said. "They're like two parts of one whole." But their greatest legacy was the example they set. When Montana achieved statehood in 1889, Caroline was one of the first women in the new state to vote, and she brought Mick with her, both of them proud to participate in democracy together. When other women faced discrimination or abuse, Caroline used her wealth and influence to support them. She funded a women's shelter in Helena, established a fund for women fleeing bad marriages, and spoke publicly about the importance of women's rights. Mick, meanwhile, advocated for better medical care for all Montanans, regardless of wealth or social standing. He trained young doctors, wrote papers on frontier medicine, and pushed for public health initiatives. Together, they proved that a marriage of equals could not only survive but thrive, that mutual respect, shared dreams, and genuine love were stronger than any social convention. In 1910, on their 21st wedding anniversary, they sat on the porch of their ranch house, expanded now to accommodate 3 children, countless guests, and a lifetime of memories, and watched the sunset paint the Montana sky in shades of gold and purple. "Do you ever regret it?" Caroline asked, her head resting on Mick's shoulder. "Giving up your career in Boston, ending up in Montana with a stubborn ranch wife?" Mick laughed. "Regret finding the love of my life? Regret building a family, a practice, a life that matters? Caroline, that night at the train station was the worst night of my life, until you appeared. Then it became the best." "I was so scared when I found you," Caroline admitted. "Scared you'd die before I could get you home. Scared of what I was feeling even then. This stranger who looked at me like I was worth saving." "You are worth saving," Mick said. "Worth everything. Caroline Sullivan, you're the bravest, strongest, most magnificent woman I've ever known. Marrying you was the smartest thing I ever did. Even though I'm bossy and stubborn?" "Especially because of that," Mick replied, kissing her. "I wouldn't change a single thing." From inside the house came the sound of their grandchildren, Beth's twin daughters, visiting for the summer, laughing as their grandfather James told them stories. "We built something good, didn't we?" Caroline said softly. "We built something extraordinary," Mick corrected. "Not just a ranch or a medical practice, but a family, a legacy, a love story that proved wrong everyone who said it couldn't work." When Dr. Michael Sullivan died in 1928 at the age of 68, after a brief illness that even his considerable medical skills couldn't defeat, the entire state of Montana mourned. He was buried on the hill overlooking Silver Creek Ranch, the land he'd come to love as much as the woman who'd saved him. Caroline lived for another 5 years, managing the ranch until her final breath. When she died in 1933 at age 76, the governor of Montana attended her funeral. Newspapers from Seattle to Boston ran obituaries celebrating her life, not just as a successful rancher, but as a pioneer who'd proven that women could lead, innovate, and thrive in a man's world. She was buried beside Mick under the vast Montana sky they'd both loved. Their children and grandchildren continued the legacy. Beth became a physician like her father, one of the first female doctors in Montana, and eventually took over his practice. James ran the Silver Creek Ranch with the same fair-handed approach his mother had pioneered. Thomas became a lawyer and fought for women's rights and workers' protections. In the Montana Historical Society Museum in Helena, visitors can still see Mick's original medical bag, the one he carried that freezing night in 1889. Next to it is Caroline's pocket watch, the one she'd given Mick on their wedding day, and a collection of photographs showing their life together. But the real monument to their love isn't in any museum. It's in the Silver Creek Ranch, still thriving after more than a century. It's in the hospital that bears both their names, the Sullivan Reed Medical Center, serving patients across Montana. It's in the countless couples who found inspiration in their story, who believed that love could overcome scandal, social conventions, and every obstacle society placed in their path. The inscription on their shared headstone, chosen by their children, reads simply, "Here lie two hearts that chose each other against all odds. May their love inspire courage in all who follow." And to this day, more than 90 years after their deaths, people visit their graves. Young women come seeking courage to pursue their dreams. Men come looking for examples of partnership and respect. Couples come to be reminded that true love isn't about perfect circumstances. It's about choosing each other every day, despite the challenges. The legend of Caroline and Michael Sullivan lives on, the wealthy rancher and her doctor, the woman who saved a freezing stranger and found love, the couple who built an empire based on mutual respect and unwavering devotion. Their love story truly did make history, proving that in the wild Montana territory, where anything was possible, the greatest fortune wasn't measured in land or cattle or gold. It was measured in two hearts that found each other on a frozen winter night and chose to build a lifetime together. Now that you've heard this tale, we'd love to know what you think. Rate this story out of 10 in the comments below, and tell us which moment captured your heart the most. Your feedback helps us bring you more frontier love stories that inspire and move you. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another tale from the American West, where love knew no boundaries and courage built legends.